Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Canning. You may have known me in other guises of life. I'm now with AMD. Who knew? But I have a great panel today. Sadly, we're not all physically together, but hey, we do what we can. We're going to be talking about a broad topic of XR from a lot of different perspectives and how we are going to be leveraging it going into the new year and how we've seen some changes in the last years. What I'll do is I'll let each one of the fine panelists introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves, because no one ever wants me to do their bio. I will start with Christina Heller.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm Christina Heller. I'm the CEO of MetaStage here in Los Angeles. I've been working exclusively in XR since the beginning of 2014, and it has been an amazing journey, a wild ride, and I've gotten to meet so many wonderful community members like the people in this panel, and I'm sure the people watching. So now, with MetaStage, we specialize in volumetric video capture. We are lucky enough to work with the Microsoft volumetric tech, along there with Jason Waskey. And volumetric video, if you're not familiar, it's live action human performance capture shot from every angle to create a fully 3D asset that you can bring into VR and AR. So if you want to bring real people into mixed reality experiences, it's the best, most authentic way to do that. So I'm going to be talking about that, but I'm also happy to talk about anything relating to XR, AR, VR, because it's an area in which I'm very passionate about and have had the privilege to do a lot of projects in the last, 7, 8 years or how long it's been. So
fine. Thank you. Arthur, you're up next.
Awesome. Happy New Year, everyone. So very nice meeting you all. I'm Vice President of Business Engineering at Meta. I'm getting used to saying Meta instead of Facebook, so that's a big win. Starting 2022 with the right foot. Our team focuses on helping businesses, all types of businesses, really leveraging our technologies to take advantage of our tools to reach their customers. And with the metaverse coming up, there is a ton of work to be done on that front as well. And couldn't be more excited to talk about this. I've been with Meta for close to 10 years now, so it has been a great journey.
Fantastic. How about you, Jason?
Thanks. Christina did a great job of doing some introduction. I won't cover a lot of old ground, but I'm a creative director here at Microsoft, where for the last dozen years, I've been focused on the extension of film and video, basically adding spatialized components to that, whether that be for pre-recorded, eventually some point live performance. Really, our job is to try to bring that human presence into mixed reality experiences across the spectrum of XR.
Fantastic. Thank you. And last but not least, Liz.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year, everyone. Liz Kuehner here from New York City. Sad not to see you in person. I was ready to travel, but it was not to be. So maybe next year we'll endeavor again. VP of Workforce and Organization in Capgemini Invent. Capgemini, if you don't know it, is a French consultancy. Last year we reached 300,000 people. So for those who aren't European, you may not be as familiar with the brand, but we have quite a presence in North America, and in workforce and organization, I'm very interested in XR as it relates to employee experience and training and all of those topics. My first dabble in XR was back when I was at IBM, and I was doing a lot of XR in the automotive space, more on the consumer side. So I'm really excited about the fact that the vision of the metaverse sort of brings together both customer experience and employee experience. And I think for many brands, those two things go hand in hand. So excited to talk about that and other topics today.
Great. Well, it's kind of fun because as I look around and everybody had talked a bit about it, we have the perspective of talk about XR, but kind of in the business perspective, right? Like in the professional. Let's not talk about Beat Saber for a second, but let's dive into from some of your perspectives. We have platform technologies, we have services, we have somebody who's engaged in businesses big and small and helping them transform themselves. Where do you see XR's place in certainly what has happened over the last year, and from your perspectives in the business? And I say in the business, like in the workplace, how are employees using this or finding themselves using it, and beyond the novelty stage, where do you see from your different companies' perspectives these engagements? And with that, Liz, why don't you lead us off? But then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, I think beyond the novelty stage, we've seen a lot of companies in heavy industry and manufacturing using XR for training or to help people, navigate vast environments like a massive warehouse, or helping a pilot to work, or somebody to repair machinery on the heavy industry side, as well as in healthcare. I think I did a brief stint at Memorial Sloan Kettering prior to coming here to Capgemini, and there was a huge interest and aspiration, which I'm sure still exists at the hospital, to create a digital twin of the human body for people to see, what reacts if we did this versus this treatment to an individual. So there's so many applications, obviously from a learning and training, and be able to, replicate a hands-on environment in cases like being in the middle of a global pandemic where you can't necessarily get people into a physical training environment, into doing things like creating a digital twin of the human body. There's so much potential, and I think we're just at the cusp of, really tapping into what that full realization might be like. But we're here now.
And when we talk about XR and as the rest of you going in there, are we talking the gamut from AR to VR? Are we talking, sort of that, as I like to say, the opacity slider of it could be an AR, it could be a VR, are we looking at specific? So also just think about it, because when we like to say XR, we kind of lump everything in there, but there's probably people out there going, well, which side of it are they talking about? Or are they talking about it truly in that sort of one end of the spectrum to the other? So Jason, I know that you guys built a lot of foundational technology in this area. You guys are continuing on, made some pretty strong statements recently about the enterprise and everything from Azure to volumetric capture to visualization. So where are you guys thinking? You've been in the business space. What's the perspective there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I represent the mixed reality capture studio team. Again, we focus primarily on that human presence. And I'd actually would sort of reframe a little bit of that, is that the core of everything we do, while the tech is really interesting and sexy to talk about, it's really about, are we fulfilling a human need? And I think humans are social animals, and we crave human connection. Something that Christine mentioned earlier about that authentic human connection. And that's true whether that's in the personal realm or in the business realm. And for us, I think it's been trying to figure out what's the right vehicle, the right scale of vehicle to try to bring that sort of starting point of that human connection into the space. And I think for us, what we've sort of settled on is that the enterprise space is probably the easiest to bring it in, because I think we understand sort of how work works a little bit in the pandemic as we broken new ground, whether that's Teams or Zoom or these other connection technologies, to really sort of see how do we bring that human connection to the forefront. So when I think about it, I think for us, the exciting challenge is to do that, whether that's both in a sort of a frame like this, where we put a bezel around everything, or whether we let ourselves go into the wild and have truly spatialized experiences, whether, again, as you mentioned, that opacity slider for reality. So again, our goal here, fulfill the human need of close personal connection. That means that we can see how other people are doing. We can see if they mirror us. We can see if their body language is off. And to do that, it's a really interesting challenge. And we've broken a lot of new ground. There's still a lot ways to go.
Fantastic. Thank you. Arthur, obviously, Meta in the formally, is there a drinking game involved in, internally, like every time somebody says Facebook, you're like,
if there was, it would be tricky. I guarantee you. Yeah.
Put a dollar in the jar every time.
Yes.
So obviously you guys have been in the business of the social world, right? And socially connecting people, but the business side of it, and you mentioned, helping businesses, what is that perspective you have on the kinds of things you were doing, but in the business sense, in the enterprise sense?
Yeah, I really think like there's so much that we're going to find out once people start experimenting it. Like our first step is always to try to do what we used to do in a previous environment into the new environment, right? And then we kind of like find new ways of doing that. Recently, we have been using a lot of workrooms, which is a virtual meeting setup. And that changes completely like how you do meetings, right? In a world where we spend like a year and a half remotely over VC, and now like seeing the person just next to you and having spatial audio, for example, being able to go to a whiteboard, that dramatically changes the connection between people. Like I think a lot of what Jason was saying, that feeling of presence, it's really hard to kind of explain that without like feeling it for real, right? That's like what we try to do in our when we announced the meta name and the direction of the company, really going to that, like trying to represent that visually, what that presence feels like, because it's really hard. But like we have seen like the team dynamics change, teams being more effective just by having that opportunity to interact with each other and really feel closer to each other. I think we're going to go through a stage where we find those new things we can do that weren't possible before. Just like when you look at the history of the internet, right? We started doing like a listing where you had to go to a search engine and kind of like sign up your website there so it could be listed, just like the yellow pages. And then we evolved into like doing that automatically and having search and so on and so forth. So I think we're going to go through some of those stages. And then like choose your topic, right? When you talk about the metaverse, you could go towards digital property. You could go trainings that changes the whole game, being honest with you, that immersiveness and a bunch of other places. So there's a lot to be done. And I think we're going to find out like, what does shopping mean in this new world, or trainings, or education, right? Like there's just so much that we're going to find out. That's why like I get really excited.
If you want, I can jump in a little on that too. One of the themes this year that we've seen at MetaStage is this enthusiasm for moving away from passive training systems towards interactive mixed reality training systems. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're just watching a video, and even if it's like a choose your own adventure video, which a lot of them are not, they're just like, if you picture like back in the day when you went to took your driver's test or something, and you're just like sitting in a chair watching some video, it's so easy to space out. It's, how much are you really retaining from that? And then you put it into the context of situations like a police training, for instance, and all of a sudden, the stakes are so high. It's like, how is sitting and watching a video on a TV or on my computer going to effectively prepare me for being in a scenario with real stakes and real emotions? And I think, there's a number of studies out there. You can do your Google research that show the effectiveness of VR training, and I'd also say AR training, in terms of retention, in terms of like really making that emotional kind of connection to the experience that then leads to retention of the information. So it seems like a lot of people like that we almost don't even need to make that point as much anymore, because the people that are in the scenarios where it really matters and there's high stakes seem to already be gravitating towards wanting to like take the next step to VR and AR training. And so, what we do at MetaStage is our thesis on that is, well, if you're going to be doing training in VR and AR, especially on anything involving human emotions or human empathy, you should probably have real human subjects and actors be in those training experiences. Because certainly, like if I'm going through a scenario and the person I'm in the experience with is like a bad, cheesy, like synthetic character, my ability to empathize with them is going to be lessened. And on top of it, there's just a lot of nuances in human behavior that are just very difficult to animate. So we've seen a lot of interest in that this year. We've had the privilege of working on like some de-escalating, like some law enforcement de-escalation training experiences, as well as medical training. And, we work with a company called Gig XR on that. And what's also exciting about medical training, so now picture like I'm a medical student and I'm going in and I'm getting the experience of diagnosing a patient who comes in with symptoms that I don't necessarily recognize right off the bat. When we go in and we capture people with these different illnesses or pathologies, we can start to build a catalog. It's like, we can capture them once, and now we have a really good dementia experience, and now capture this next person, and now we have a really good Parkinson's experience. And you can start to build this. And, to Jason's point, like, that the schools, they are willing to use the HoloLenses to, be the first on the cutting edge of this type of, training. So anyway, so that's been exciting for me personally as well, because I'm starting to see like productization of these experiences we're building, and it's also cool to build something that could actually improve the world and be used by millions of people. So
wow.
Maybe just to add an example to what Christina just said. I remember a few years ago when we started exploring more with VR, people figured out that it was so hard to do comedy in VR because you are so close, right? And when you're like watching a 2D screen in a cinema and the character, I don't know, slips in a banana, then you laugh. Like it was really hard to get people to laugh at these kind of situations when they were immersed in the situation. They felt sorry for the person or for the character, right? Like that's how much it changes the game when you're immersed in the situation.
I mean, look, I'm just excited that you all are going to transform those corporate videos that I have to do by Friday. Yeah, workplace safety. Somebody please make those videos better.
Cybersecurity, the list goes on.
Yeah. But okay, so this sounds great, but what are the friction points? What do you see are we've kind of painted this is where we're headed, but what are some of the sticking points, that you see in your businesses that you're trying to overcome, that you can still see, or this is what's preventing it from getting it to that nirvana? And Liz, if you want to dive in, but think about what are still the challenges, because it can't all just be like that, or we would have it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some key challenges, which maybe companies like Meta will help us overcome, is around interoperability and standardization, or the lack thereof. Like for a while, it was the Wild West with mixed reality and VR. So it was very hard, to create the right level of standardization. So that's one point. I think another point that many people have made is that inclusivity is a challenge. And in a world where we're already confronted with a growing digital divide, is this yet another emerging technology that is going to create a class of have and have nots as far as access and who actually gets to benefit from these experiences? So I think that those are two things, just off the top of my head that come to mind as far as challenges. They're both, of course, opportunities as well that we can no doubt overcome, but things we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same word. Like, it feels like if metaverse was the big term of 2021, interoperability is going to be the big term for 2022. And it makes sense because we want to give people access, to these experiences. And so on our end, what we've seen is like all of the clients that are coming through and doing experiences with us want it to be both on headset, but also on mobile. They want to make sure that there's, as long as you have like a modern cell phone, you can still access these training experiences, which is great. And, the tools are there to make that possible. It's a little extra development. So that's a friction point, because it's not necessarily the same to develop a training experience for HoloLens, for the, Quest or Vive Focus, and for your mobile device. That being said, it's not impossible. So, if you can get through the development, maybe headaches of building for different platforms, then you have something that is, at least accessible to people on a broad scale.
If I could add a little bit to that, part of what we've done, we had a really, I think, solid innovation in getting to a volumetric capture that's very high quality, but we've really spent like the last 4, 5, 6 years on making sure that the content will play across as many devices as possible. And that includes even flat pancaked experiences as opposed to like immersive content. We've tried to build the technology, for at least from our end, so that it can be everywhere. So it doesn't have to be as gatekept to just people who have like sort of fairly rare, as far as the market goes, devices. I would say part of what we've seen, I think the challenge is that where we do have interoperability components, that the language of how you build experiences to be compelling has not yet been developed. To the sense being that, we've had about 100 plus years of the language of film and how you edit and how you put a point of view together, where you draw focus and how you build story and move things along. And we don't have that same level of experience or expertise in how you construct experiences where you can't guarantee where the eye will be. So we know that in immersive experiences, as Christina mentioned, that you have far greater retention. Part of that's because you can't really multitask your way through the experiences. Your brain is completely lit up across the board in terms of where am I, how am I doing, what's going on. But how you make sure that the most important things are seen and heard and are retained for themselves, that's a language is yet to be developed. And that's, while we talk about it from the volumetric video sense, you can see that replicated across a wide variety of experiences, whether that's choose your own adventure. How do you edit to make sure that people get the right, like I'm looking in the right area at the right time? It's going to require like a brand new class of artists and writers and creators, not just technologists, to come into the space to help move the tech forward.
And I think, go ahead, Art.
No, I was just going to add, like, to what Jason said. Like, I think it's really important that we keep offering all these different experiences, not just like in one device, right, in one format, because there's going to be, like, the metaverse is really us bringing the digital and the physical world together. And they need to work together, right? Like, it's going to be great for me to, like, if we could just all put our AR glasses and see each other here and interact, and even if we had someone in person, right? But that mixed thing is really important, an important piece to it. And it's definitely a point of friction if we start just like over pivoting to one side or another. Like, we need to offer all these experiences, as Christina also said.
So when we talk about interoperability, what are we talking, go back to W3C web standards, what is the interoperability in this sort of universe that we talk about? Like, is it protocols? Is it design language? Is it what, if we can break it and dive into a bit more of that, what is the things that we need to go back and forth?
I think digital ownership is an important one. Right? If I buy a digital item that helps me represent my identity, I don't know, like a digital Nike shoes in the form of an NFT, like I need to be able to bring that alongside with me in all the different worlds I'm visiting or I'm part of, or even to work. Right. So digital ownership, I think it's one that's going to be crucial, but there are probably like many others, like protocols, technologies themselves, right? Like we're going to rely on the internet, but what kind of protocols are we building on top of the current technologies as well? And then also like digital formats, right? Like you shouldn't need to re-encode all your videos or re-encode all your digital assets, right? I think those are two that are top of mind for me.
Secure streaming from like a cloud is also probably something that will be very useful when it comes to building, apps that can play on a bunch of different devices and in different, modes. We're always kind of worried about space and like how much content you can fit into one of these experiences. And so I think the more we can kind of streamline like the hosting of content and effortlessly streaming it into the applications is key. And I'll also say, I think what like Unity and Unreal are doing is really useful and helpful. I think that if you look at some of the older training, like for instance, like military training experiences, people were building them in their own engines. And so it's like all of a sudden, you have to have something that works specifically for this one proprietary engine that like they built in a long time ago. And now all of a sudden, we're seeing this kind of, lucky for those companies, this like acceptance of basically Unity and Unreal as the main, two that we're working with, and they tend to be compatible against like with a lot of platforms. So I think that, that's at least has solved one of the issues with interoperability, is that, they are compatible across VR, AR, and, and other methods of distribution.
Well, I was going to say, we can go to universal scene description if anybody really wants to, but, that does also speak to, how, from a volumetric capture standpoint, what are those files looking like? How do I ingest those into different engines? So I think there is that layer that we have to deal with. From a what are businesses asking for? What are they asking for right now? And you mentioned the medical, which we see a number of experiments and people trying to do things, but what is that thing that is the enterprise is saying, this is where, is it training videos? Is it the next immersive training aspect? What is that thing that they're asking for?
I think people are definitely interested in onboarding. It's particularly as many companies over the past few months have been divesting in real estate and saying we're going to be in this virtual hybrid model forever. And then there have been some queries last year that I'm curious to see what actually comes through to fruition, is people's idea to make some sort of a virtual headquarters. So people can gather from anywhere around the world in this space, much like or in the metaverse, to be able to, beyond virtual happy hours, which we've all gotten really tired of, convene and do things together and be able to have that sense of play and imagination and innovation that we all used to love from some of our great office experiences that we remember, that is hard to get when we're all sitting in our home offices.
I think
Jason?
just to build on what Liz said is that the killer app for XR is presence. And I think honestly, it's presence, whether that be via avatar, whether that be more photographically based presence. At the end of the day, the transmission of honest signals, the transmission of who we are and the state of where we are at any given moment to another person, so that we feel that we are connected to that person, that we're in the same space, wherever that be. That is hands down the killer app. And it's tough because bandwidth is a hard thing. Having multiple experiences with multiple modalities for consumption, whether that's web page, an HMD or other components, it's hard to get those things all strung across one place so we all feel together in the same way, at the same level, equitably. But again, I think from what Liz said, it's about, we're humans. And as humans, the goal is, how do we make what we do naturally fit into new paradigms, not do it the other way around.
How do we, and I think that's fantastic, because I think it just comes back to, it's less about the tech and it's more about the, it's how do we maintain or evolve our connection with each other, and there are going to be different technologies that play in this. But I think, what about the notion of identity and preserving my identity? You mentioned, whether it's a volumetric capture of me or an avatar of me, but how do I know it's me, and how do I preserve me, and how do I secure me as I travel to different, parts of this verse? So what are the thoughts around that sense of identity and notion of maintaining a digital twin is my digital self-ish? So, does anybody have any thoughts on that aspect of it?
Well, we're already seeing plenty of catfishing happening in the existing internet. So I would say digital identity is already a big issue when you're on the, basically not in person and can verify that somebody is right in front of you. And I don't know. I don't know that I'm like, that might be a little above my pay grade as far as getting all of the answers to it. But I actually think that one of the cool things about XR is that you can play with your identity a bit. Like it's kind of fun that you can inhabit a different persona and be a different gender, species of animal, that kind of thing for an hour or two. But, I think at least when we're talking about like social VR, because I do a decent amount of that in both Altspace and VR Chat and now Horizon as well. I think that the platforms are doing a pretty good job of making it so that if somebody's bothering you, or, if you're not enjoying someone's company, that you can disappear from them or block them. And so I just think there's going to have to be a lot of layers for, kind of monitoring and creating customizations for interactions on the internet. But I think that this idea, and I suppose there will need to be some way that you can authenticate that it is truly you. But I think there's also going to be plenty of people who enjoy the anonymity just for the fun of it, I don't know.
Go ahead, Jason. No, go ahead, please.
If you open up a can of worms there, John, because I think it is a thing that I don't know that anybody really has the answer to. For me, I've seen it as being a real tension between a balance between authenticity and plasticity. And I think just that sense of there's a form of authenticity comes purely from expression that doesn't have to be linked to, a faithful recreation of who I am or where I am or how I am in a given moment. At the same time, there's definitely, I think, in many ways, kind of an undervalued sense that a sort of photographic-based representation reality has an innate level of authenticity that's frankly just hard to beat. I think about in many ways if you look at the past, if you're thinking about being in the future and you're looking past, do I want to see myself? Do I want to view like my memories and history as being, sort of an avatar based myself, or do I want to see the real me in that moment? I don't know the actual answer to those questions, but that tension between those two things, authenticity and plasticity, is something I think we're going to be working on for quite a while. And society and how we as humans interact with each other may change. And it may be that at some point we actually choose to give up or hold to very, very small social circles, that sense of like, here's who I am in the moment versus here's who I want to present myself being. At the end of the day, everything we're doing right now is about taking who I am right now in this moment in time and recontextualizing it into another space, another place, or another time. And so that balance again between authenticity and plasticity is going to be something that we're struggling with for a very, very, very long time. Probably needs to be something you can slide up or down that scale at any given moment, depending on the.
I know, good point. Arthur?
Yeah, no, I couldn't say it better than Jason just did. I love how you put it out and the words you used to describe it. That one of the biggest selling points for the internet has always been like you being able to be someone else, in that sense, like someone you want to kind of like push it out there. That's not necessarily how you physically are, and just give you options. And I don't think we can afford to lose that. But then being able to bring that context around your identity to the different places is important, right? So maybe for work, I want to be my work self. And then when I'm playing Population 1, I'm going to be somebody completely different. But if I decide to take the Population 1 me to, I don't know, Call of Duty, I should be able to, right? So I think those are kind of like, and it goes back to the friction points and the protocols we need to all kind of agree on, because I really think we need both. Like there are going to be activities where I need to be the person that I am in physical life, but there are other places where I will want to bring my identity and represent myself in a different way, different gender, different species, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think another evolution that we'll see over time is the move from natural interfaces to neural interfaces, and actually having controllers that interact with our brain or our neural system, which may sound very far away, but probably within all of our lifetimes, we'll see and experience that. And if you haven't already seen a Black Mirror episode that taps into that concept, there's a lot that's already out there sort of pointing to what that looks like.
Well, I mean, if you think about, we can now drive a character, we do authentication via, a facial recognition or retinal recognition, right? The even audio, some of the online credit card services, you call in and there's a voice recording that you've put down and they do authentication through your voice. And then if you think about how you drive characters, right? And the evolution we've had to now being able to drive a fairly sophisticated version of yourself just from a single webcam. And so, whether it's neural or visual interfaces, but being able to drive that. And I think the identity services are going to be a cornerstone of how we go forth, and how do you have your core identity, and you can choose to mold it. And, if you've seen Bruce Willis's Russian ads that he did as a deep fake, right? Bruce was perfectly fine to perform and not perform, but get paid to be in a Russian ad that he didn't actually have to do the work. Handy that. But that notion of, letting your digital identity out and being able to do it in such a way that you can authenticate it, you secure it, you get paid for it. 2021, 2020 were odd years. We're hoping, as we storm into 2022, and we couldn't go to our first conference again. But with a little bit of hope and a little bit of going forward, as we go and through closing this up, what do you think for you in 2022? What do you hope to see happen next in this sphere of technology? And if we meet again in 2023 and we do this panel again, you went, see, that was the thing that I thought would happen, and it did. what are your perspectives on what are we going to do in 2022? It's a hybrid world. We're sort of going back to work. We're sort of okay with not being at work. And the XR technology plays a part in that. So from your perspectives, what do you think 2022 is going to look like for us?
I think it'll look like the last, at least, so I've only been in XR since 2014. So, and granted, people have been working on these challenges for many decades, but in my experience, there are always these like big, these big proclamations about like, this is going to be the year for that. But what we actually see is this gradual increase in tools getting better, experiences getting better, groundbreaking activations that do it better than the person before, and honestly, I think that's what I'm going to play it a little safe here. I think that's what 2022 is going to be. We're going to see, improvements over the XR experiences we saw in 2021. I'm excited about some of the developments in like holopresence and live volumetric things that we're seeing out there. I'm excited about virtual production and, the advancements we've seen in that space using these tools for framed media experiences. But in general, I think if we end the year maybe with broader adoption of AR glasses, perhaps that could be fun. But yeah, that's my thing is that we're just going to see, like we have for the last 7 or 8 years, a gradual but definite improvement in all of this work that we do and in people consuming it.
Safe, but I think accurate. How about you, Arthur?
I'm pretty much along the same lines as Christina. I think we're going to see a lot of progress on foundational things, like core technology, advancements in hardware in different ways. But I think the biggest shift will be like increased consumer behavior in this space. So we're going to see more and more people having some of these experiences, either through like VR headsets or AR glasses, or even their phones, but just like being more exposed, which will hopefully also paint us a clearer picture of what's about to come. So again, I don't think anything revolutionary or huge, but we're going to see like things getting to mainstream, like maybe NFTs or blockchain in general, and then like some of the VR and AR experiences as well.
Jason, thoughts?
Yeah, look, just as Arthur and Christine said, this is a marathon. It's probably an ultra marathon as opposed to a sprint. I actually think that one of the things I'm super excited for this next year is that I think we're going to see more inclusive and an expanded representation across the board. And I say that just in the sense that the technologies that we've built by their nature tend to be kind of a narrow confine of how we show human beings to another human being. I'm expecting and hoping that as our technologies have matured somewhat, we're going to see greater, more accurate and faithful representation to whether that's your interior sense of who you are or your exterior sense. That's a thing I think is going to make it more interesting for people to come into the space and to feel like they belong in the space better. And I'm really hoping, I believe, and we'll be pushing for that to happen in 2022.
Great, fantastic. Liz, some thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the creation of a network of decentralized virtual spaces. And tech giants like Meta will be contributing to that, as well as startups and scale-up organizations that will really begin, as we just discussed, laying the foundation and the fabric for what's to come. But it is, as we've already alluded to, the creation of a new language, the creation of a new experience, and how we move through the universe or the metaverse.
Well, look, I mean, I certainly hope that all of those pieces that you've laid down come to fruition. I think interoperability, inclusivity, and that ability of expression. I often said, you could show up in World of Warcraft and nobody knew what race, sex, gender you were. Now the rest of the population gets to experience that in a lot of different ways. So, here is to marching into 2022. Hopefully I get to see some of you physically, but also you're going to make my holographic presence even better, and I appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for joining the audience. And I hope you all have great start of a new year. Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.